Hello everyone, it's Theme Park Avenue, I'm Eric. Florida is renowned for its legendary theme parks. From Walt Disney World to SeaWorld Orlando, the parks have roller coasters that are loved by many. 3 of the most beloved roller coasters are Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure, VelociCoaster, and Iron Gwazi. Whether it be for thrills or theming, these 3 new rides are some of the most impressive feats of engineering in the theme park industry. However, the areas where these rides are found looked very different just 5 years ago. Before Hagrid's and VelociCoaster were built, the B&M inverted roller coaster Dueling Dragons stood in the wizarding world of Harry Potter. Before Iron Gwazi opened, the plot of land it is currently inhabiting was held by the dueling GCI wooden coaster, Gwazi. So why did Dueling Dragons and Gwazi disappear? Well, these rides had complicated and frightening histories, but they have some interesting parallels, which I will share with you today. Here is the history of Florida's dueling roller coasters. Gwazi and Dueling Dragons are very different rides. However, they have some striking similarities. For one, both rides opened in 1999. So let's start from there. On May 28, 1999, Universal Studios Orlando opened its second theme park, and it was known as Islands of Adventure. One of the most prominent rides was Dueling Dragons, a pair of inverted roller coasters manufactured by Swiss company Bolliger and Mabillard. This company was relatively new, but had created plenty of successful roller coasters, and many of those were inverted coasters like Dueling Dragons. Examples include Montauk Busch Gardens Tampa, Raptor Cedar Point, and Alpengeist Busch Gardens Williamsburg. Dueling Dragons was in a fairy tale themed area known as the Lost Continent, and it was themed accordingly. After walking past 2 impressive dragon statues, one based on fire and one based on ice, guests would enter a grand but seemingly ruined castle with dungeons that are filled with torches, armor, and skeletons. The queue seems to tell a story of 2 dragons that left waste to a land and are still feuding to this day. The ride has a medieval theme, which makes sense given the ride was planned to be named Merlin's Dueling Dragons, but that was shortened before opening. This theme was something special, but it did not last forever. In 2010, the ride was rethemed to fit in the wizarding world of Harry Potter, which is a retheme of part of the Lost Continent. The adjacent Flying Unicorn roller coaster was also rethemed and is now known as Flight of the Hippogriff. As a result, the ride was renamed to Dragon Challenge, and the cube was redesigned to be themed to the Triwizard Tournaments, an event from the Harry Potter franchise where 4 wizards competed for a trophy. The cube was still fairly impressive. You walk past many banners for the contestants, a car which also references Harry Potter, and the castle facade of the original ride was preserved. Within the castle, the dungeon theme was somewhat removed. It was replaced with more banners, the trophy they are competing for, and some dark rocky tunnels that are somewhat like the original, but they are exactly the same as those on Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure. There was also a projection that showed dragons on the ceiling of the queue area, which was a nice touch. The 2 dragon statues were removed from the entrance as well. Riders could go either left or right at an intersection point and choose between riding fire or ice respectively. For the Harry Potter theme, the fire side was renamed Chinese Fireball, and the ice one renamed Hungarian Horntail. These are dragons from the Harry Potter franchise, but both breathe fire, meaning the story of a battle between dragons is kind of replaced with the idea of riding a roller coaster in a sporting event. The theme was still somewhat cohesive and impressive, but it lacked the weight of the original. That said, the 2 roller coaster tracks were just as good as ever. The Fire Dragon side was a red track with a drop of 115 feet, a top speed of 60 miles per hour, and 5 inversions. The ice side is a smaller drop of 95 feet and a top speed of 55 miles per hour, but it was still quite thrilling and had 5 inversions of its own. No matter the theme, the most famous moment on the ride is when each track had a vertical loop positioned in a way that the trains on both tracks come just feet from hitting each other, before continuing through the layout. This was a spectacle for the riders who came so close to others, and for those watching from the sidelines as they got the ultimate photo opportunity. This moment was a highlight for many, or at least it was, until 2011. On July 31st, 2011, a rider was hit in the eye with an unidentified object that came out of the pocket of another rider. Many believe it was a coin, but we do not know for sure. The worst part of this incident might be the fact that the victim had only one functioning eye before the incident happened, and a lost function in the other one. This meant a person completely lost sight as a result of riding Dragon Challenge. Another incident occurred soon after. On August 10, 2011, just 2 weeks after the previous incident, another rider was struck by an unknown object. This rider lost sight in one eye and injured their leg. This was enough for the park to feel the need to take action. In order to prevent future injuries, metal detectors were installed in the queue so that nobody could get their phone or other potentially dangerous loose articles on the ride. They added free lockers next to the ride that guests were required to leave their stuff in if they didn't have a non-rider to hold it for them. Unfortunately, the bigger blow to the ride experience was the removal of the dueling aspect. The trains ran separately, and capacity was severely hindered by the fact that half the amount of riders could cycle through at a time. No dueling roller coasters were quite as impressive in their interaction with others as this one. But sadly, it did not last. In order to keep people from getting hit by objects in the other car, if they got past the metal detector that is, the two sides would run separately, never to duel again. The loss of both the dueling and the original impressive story and queue of the ride meant that it was kind of a shell of its former self. Several still loved the queue and thrilling ride experience, but many roller coaster enthusiasts felt that without the dueling, the ride was not as special. For a thrill seeker in Florida, it may have been more worth it to go to Montauk at Busch Gardens Tampa or even Batman the Ride at Six Flags Over Georgia instead. The ride was still excellent, but at a world-class theme park like Islands of Adventure, the ride didn't quite have the theming or wow factor of other beloved rides, including its new neighbor, Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey. In order to improve the most lucrative area of the park, the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, it made sense that Dragon Challenge would be replaced with something that fit the Harry Potter theme. This is why we got Hagrid's in 2019. Dragon Challenge permanently closed in 2017. Interestingly, its permanent closure occurred just weeks before my first visit to the park. The ride was sorely missed by many, including myself, as I missed the chance to ride it. Many feel that Dragon Challenge was better than Hagrid's, at least when the dueling was in effect. However, most agree that Hagrid's does fit in the Wizarding World much better than Dragon Challenge. I personally very much enjoy Hagrid's, primarily for its theming elements. For the thrill seeker in me, I assume I would have preferred Dragon Challenge as a whole, maybe even without the dueling. But I am not against the decision to replace it with an expensive and immersive roller coaster that many now call the best in the park. Even Hagrid's was not enough to make up for the loss of Dragon Challenge though, and I believe that is part of the reason why VelociCoaster was made. Hagrid's made up for the loss of the impressive theme of Dragon Challenge by preserving parts of the queue, but adding ruins that fit the theme better. However, the thrills of Dragon Challenge were not nearly as prevalent on Hagrid's. Fortunately, VelociCoaster was even more intense and thrilling than Dragon Challenge was, and the majority of coaster enthusiasts say VelociCoaster is much better. So overall, Dragon Challenge gradually lost the things that made it a world-class attraction, and while it was always great, it makes sense from a business perspective that the park's thematic cohesion has greatly improved with the loss of Dragon Challenge. With arguably the two best rides having been added since 2019 to replace Dueling Dragons, the park has shown that it's always trying to improve every aspect of the guest experience, even at the cost of a great ride, if the benefits outweigh its loss. Gwazi had an equally complicated overall history, but it got weirder after it closed as opposed to leading up to the closure. On June 18, 1999, Gwazi opened to the public at Busch Gardens, Tampa. It replaced the Anheuser-Busch brewery in the middle of the park. The park chose to make a wooden coaster because supposedly, antiquated attractions were quite popular, and it would be unique in Florida, given the focus on more modern attractions such as the Incredible Hulk and Dueling Dragons. The dueling wooden coasters were not highly themed, but the two sides had different names. One was called Lion, and one was called Tiger. This fit with the Gwazi theme that was created by Busch Gardens, a mythical creature with the head of a tiger and body of a lion. The idea that this animal was fighting with itself, a sort of internal battle and internal duel, if you will, between lion and tiger, was kind of a fun one. The tracks were often called yellow and blue because the lion trains were yellow and the tiger trains are blue. The ride was manufactured by Great Coasters International, or GCI. This manufacturer was even newer than Bollinger and Mabillard, having made only 3 roller coasters before Gwazi. The first was Wildcat at Hershey Park in 1996, which is permanently closed as of July 2022, and will most likely be converted into a hybrid roller coaster by Rocky Mountain Construction. They also made 2 duplicate roller coasters named Roar in 1998, one at Six Flags America and one at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. The one at Discovery Kingdom was also turned into an RMC hybrid. This Gwazi would be an early project for GCI, and would have a few impressive feats. Each track had a similar but not identical layout, and the tracks contained a total of 6 flybys. meaning the trains would go right past each other in opposite directions 6 different times, a world record at this point. The 2 tracks were each 105 feet tall, went 51 miles per hour, and had a length of 3,508 feet. The ride was overall well received at first. People praised the flyby moments, especially the dispatch from the station and first drop. Gwazi even placed in the top 50 wooden coasters list for Amusement Today's Golden Ticket Awards. The ride was enjoyed by many in the early 2000s, and was certainly unique as one of only 2 wooden roller coasters in Florida. Unfortunately, there's a reason so few wooden coasters are in this state. Florida is an extremely humid state. Humidity is often in the high 60s out of 100. And it's also a state prone to hurricanes. Gwazi was built with strong pine wood that was baked in a kiln for several weeks in order to protect it from rotting and other damage. The ride was built to withstand wind speeds of up to 100 miles per hour. The ride survived through years of Florida weather, but not without issues springing up. The wood did begin to rot, and the foundation kind of became shakier, leading to the ride becoming quite rough, even after the Lion and Tiger sides were retracked in 2009 and 2010 respectively, and the old Philadelphia Toboggan Company, or PTC, trains were replaced with more comfortable Millennium Flyer trains. I have personally ridden Gwazi several times, so I can comment on what the ride was like in the late 2000s. My first rides were in 2009 and 2010, and it was an extremely rough ride. The rattle would shake me so much that one time, I was able to give my brother an electric shock by touching him at the end of the ride. Maybe this was a coincidence, but the ride was insanely bumpy. Even so, I always rode it when I went to the park. I loved the dueling, and it was a fast ride. My last rides were over 7 years ago, so I'm curious about how much worse my tolerance for roughness is for this ride, and if it'd be even worth re-riding if I went on it today. Gwazi's popularity certainly dwindled, even after improvements were made to the track and restraints. Part of this relates to new roller coasters at the park, and even some older ones, maintaining higher ridership partially due to their smoothness. Montu, Kumba, and Shikra were all manufactured by B&M, which makes reliable roller coasters that are popular amongst most audiences and are easy to maintain. The popularity of Gwazi was especially hurt by a roller coaster that opened in 2011, and provided a new breed of speed. Cheetah Hunt was an intimate blitz roller coaster with 3 launches and a long ride experience. It quickly became the most popular ride in the park, taking more riders away from Gwazi. Now that people preferred at least 4 roller coasters and several other rides and experiences to the painful and difficult to maintain Gwazi, it was not feasible to keep the ride running at maximum capacity. This, along with the struggle to keep both sides operating in Florida, is why the Tiger side closed permanently in 2012. It remained standing, but the ride was certainly not getting any better, and I recall my last rides in Gwazi being some of my least favorites I've had on any roller coaster ever. On February 1st, 2015, the Lion side officially closed due to the ride having negative reviews, low ride attendance, and high maintenance costs. The ride was not worth keeping around financially, so it stood for years, untouched, with no word on the park from what was to come of the area. Immediately, coaster enthusiasts theorized that the ride would be converted into an RMC hybrid. For those who do not know, Rocky Mountain Construction, or RMC, was a new roller coaster manufacturer that made a name for itself by redesigning unpopular wooden coasters with new layouts and steel track, often preserving parts of the original structure. Their conversions of Texas Giant at Six Flags Over Texas to New Texas Giant, and also of Rattler at Six Flags Fiesta Texas to Iron Rattler, were massively popular amongst thrill seekers, so many, including myself, hoped this would happen now that Gwazi was gone. But what did replace the ride? Well, Busch Gardens Tampa added a mock spinning roller coaster called Cobra's Curse in 2016 for the family audience. The ride was well themed, and is still quite popular, but it wasn't really part of the replacement of Gwazi. The first major development in regards to Gwazi arose in 2018. SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment, owners of Busch Gardens, filed for trademarks for 3 names: Uproar, Tigris, and Twisted Tiger. The last one caught everyone's attention, because 3 RMC hybrid roller coasters have been named Twisted Colossus, Twisted Timbers, and Twisted Cyclone. The fact that these names are also similar to Twisted Tiger, and no other roller coasters really had Twisted as a main part of their name, meant several thought RMC Gwazi was practically confirmed. The question was, when would it be built? In 2018, rumors of a premier ride Skyrocket 2, replacing Tanganyika Tidal Wave, had already begun to spread. The water ride Tanganyika Tidal Wave had closed in 2016, and the rumors of a ride replacing it were confirmed on September 12, 2018. Tigris would be a clone of Tempesto at Busch Gardens Williamsburg and Electric Eel at SeaWorld San Diego. The Skyrocket 2 rides have a very small footprint and involve 3 launches. The first did not have the power needed to get the car to the top of the layout, forcing it to go backwards and launch in reverse. The car would not clear the top of the track backwards either, and would go forward into one final launch that sent the ride through the whole layout. The ride had only 2 major elements, but was still relatively popular. However, it felt like a filler attraction for many. And as it turns out, it was. At the same time Tigris was announced, it was revealed that a new thrill ride would be built in Gwazi's plot of land, and the park president mentioned that the ride had a rocky history. This one word was enough for most to believe that Rocky Mountain construction redoing Gwazi was confirmed. On this day, one final trademark was filed. It was a name that would linger in the minds of thrill seekers for years to come: Iron Gwazi. On March 1st, 2019, Busch Gardens Tampa confirmed that the park was building not just an RMC conversion of Gwazi, but the tallest, fastest, and steepest hybrid coaster in North America. On September 12, 2019, a year after Tigris was announced, this teaser was released.
Something's coming.
Yeah, I wish the wait had been over. Iron Gwazi would take on the theme of a crocodile instead of a lion and tiger, but this was practically irrelevant. What people were more interested in was the ride's 206-foot drop, 76-mile-per-hour top speed, intense layout, and 2 very impressive inversions. The ride was slated to open in spring 2020, and it seemed that the opening would happen on time, unlike Falcon's Fury. Construction finished on March 8th, and testing began the following day. Everything was going according to plan, but then COVID-19 took the world by storm. Right after testing began, Busch Gardens Tampa closed due to the need to keep people safe during the pandemic. Nothing of note really occurred for the next few months, but the park reopened in June 2020 with Iron Gwazi standing completed and presumably ready to open. It did not open, at least not in 2020. Fortunately, the park announced that Iron Gwazi would open in spring 2021, so many, like myself, were excited. But as spring 2021 rolled around, the park changed the spring 2021 banner on their website to say, "Anticipated opening 2021. This anticipation would end up being incorrect, with the official opening date being March 11th, 2022, opening the pass holders on February 13th, 2022, and a few days earlier for some other groups such as American coaster enthusiasts. Compared to VelociCoaster, which began construction after Iron Gwazi, this is interesting, as that ride opened to pass holders on June 10th, 2021. The wait is over line from the teaser trailer for Iron Gwazi became a meme amongst roller coaster enthusiasts because the wait was far from over. To this day, it is unknown for sure what factors truly caused the delays, but it's believed that many issues led back to the pandemic, such as staffing or certain regulations. We may never know for sure, but there were actually rumors that the park was afraid to open within a month of a VelociCoaster, and they delayed for this reason. Once the wait was over, nearly everyone agreed the ride was worth the wait. Maybe this was due to riders being hyped for the roller coaster for 3 years, and then being excited to ride it. Maybe Busch Gardens wanted to build hype for as long as they could, so the reviews would be overwhelmingly positive. I rode Iron Gwazi on February 13th, and I did deem it my favorite roller coaster, a title it holds to this day, above VelociCoaster. Who would have thought that a rough, unpopular dueling wooden coaster could become the star attraction of the park for so many, and for a lot of people, dethroning VelociCoaster as the best thrill ride in Florida. Unlike Dragon Challenge, Gwazi is not sorely missed by many, and many feel the park is the best it's ever been, even calling Busch Gardens Tampa one of the best theme parks in the world. Dueling Dragons and Gwazi have histories with far more similarities than meets the eye. Besides the original rides both being dueling and opening in 1999, both rides were themed to a battle between animals, they were most loved for their dueling aspect, stopped dueling within a year of each other, began to lose popularity when the dueling stopped, and people opted to wait for other rides instead. Both closed after just under 20 years of operation, Both were replaced with popular and less thrilling roller coasters in 2019, and then a new attraction followed up as one of the best thrilling roller coasters in the world, within a year of each other. And both had their legacy honored in some way. The queue and final break run for Iron Gwazi contained signs that pay homage to Gwazi. And much of the spirit of Dragon Challenge has been preserved in the queue for Hagrid's. It is interesting that two Floridian dueling coasters that were part of a starting era for their parks, whether it be the opening of Islands of Adventure, or Busch Gardens Tampa becoming a theme park more than the brewery, had such problematic histories and ended up being replaced with rides that would turn their parks into destinations for travelers around the world. Now the only dueling roller coaster left in Florida is Space Mountain, but that's a story for another time. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this documentation of Gwazi and Dueling Dragons. Subscribe for more theme park content. I'll see you next time.